We get a lot of questions, Whatley, about working at height and what kind of OSHA considerations, fall harnesses, what line items in Xactimate exist for working at height. Anytime you have a class 3 loss, water coming down from the ceiling, what additional line items should I be using? Guess what? There are 4 new line items for working at height when working in the WTR category code. So let's dive in and take a look at these line items. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Price List Update Summary. This is a video series brought to you by Actionable Insights, where we jump into all of the new Xactimate line items that came out every month. This is August. I am Harrison. That is Whatley. And we're going to break down, looks like 13 new line items that came out in the August edition of the Xactimate price list. Now, before we jump into these things, shout out to everyone that joined us in our Xactimate Estimating and Digital Assets class 2 weeks ago, back in July. Had an amazing class. Our next one is coming up in October. So if you're interested in learning about Xactimate and price lists and line items and estimating, join us. That's the best way to learn from Actionable Insights. In the meantime, we've got this video series where we jump through all the new line items that came out. Our goal is to provide context and purpose to the line items. It's important that you know about the line items that were added to the Xactimate price list. It's even more important that you know how to use them. So without further ado, let's jump into the 13 new line items that came out in Xactimate in the August price list changes. So from the top here, Whatley, I got tear out subfloor. Tear out subfloor bag for disposal, an after hours option, a category 3 after hours, no bagging, category 3, no bagging, category 3 after hours. So one, this is similar to a lot of line items and how it's structured and presented. You've got bagging, no bagging options. You've got Cat 3, Cat 1 options. You've got after hours and normal options. But one thing that you and I looked at in preparation for this recording is that you were like, isn't there a line item that already existed for tearing out subfloors or sleepers or something? So we looked at it and you are correct. Line item 7 here, WTR SFSL, is not a new line item. Whoa. Not a new line item. This is a line item that already existed, but I have it here kind of in its own space to highlight the difference of like, hey, so there was a tear out subfloors sleepers and bag for disposal line item, but there was no individual tear out subfloor line item. Thoughts, reactions to these new additions?
Yeah, this subfloor sleeper is really common in the Northeast, but if you're out here on the West Coast, sleepers just don't exist. So this is really helpful if you've got to remove a subfloor, which is becoming even more common because, the post-war homes, like built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they use plywood. They can deal with some water, right?
Yeah.
But almost all the new construction, it uses some version of medium density fiberboard, press board. It just doesn't stand up to large amounts of water. So what did you do? Well, it wasn't clear because all we had was this tear out subfloor line item. So it's odd
with
that
sleepers.
The sleepers, because it seems like that line item would have came later. The base line item would have been, and you can see it in the selector code, tear out subfloor and bag. Usually the longer selector codes are for the line items that are added later or with greater detail. But this one kind of worked in the inverse. But, pricing seems on point, give you plenty of options, familiar scenarios between Cat 3 after hours and Cat 1 and 2 for after hours. Well, I guess that does lead to the overarching question we get a lot is what do you do with Cat 2?
So this is something that we talk about in our Xactimate training class. Some line items in the WTR category code say up to Cat 3, meaning likely there's a normal line item, category 1 line item, and then if there's a up to Cat 3 option, that would typically address both category 2 and category 3 with the language up to Cat 3. But occasionally there are line items that only say, for example, like this subfloor, tear out subfloor and bag for disposal, likely Cat 1, then tear out subfloor and bag for disposal, category 3. And there is no category 2 line item. In fact, out of the 20,000 plus Xactimate line items, there are not many that say category 2 specifically. So Whatley, how would you recommend tackling invoicing for tearing out a subfloor, bagging for disposal, category 2?
Well, I think you'd first have to acknowledge that we're doing it wrong. This is informed from a presentation I caught from Mickey, and he was one of the original authors of the IICRC S500. And he put this pie chart up there and he's like, when we authored this and we looked at what's Cat 1 and Cat 2 and Cat 3, 70% of the losses in our estimation were Category 2. And it's interesting if you observe, Xactimate Ninjas, the activities there. It seems like,
which is, by the way, our Facebook group, which you're welcome to join. Everyone can join Xactimate Ninjas.
Yeah, I think we're going to hit 11,000 members this week. So anyhow, good conversations going on out there, but it just seems like the industry has adjusters. If there's a question about what category it is, be it IAs and staff adjusters, they all tend to bias Cat 1. And then contractors, I see all too often, that's Cat 3, right? And, my take on this is that Cat 2 is really, that champions the spirit of the original authorship. Like most things are not grossly contaminated, but a Cat 1 loss is kind of hard to come by, because when is the water not somewhat contaminated and doesn't need to be dealt with thoughtfully? So I think one of the reasons that people don't identify losses as Cat 2 as often as they otherwise would is it's because of the deficiency within the price list. Is it's unclear how you actually bill for it. And so you do a good job of providing some guidance for our students, but it's not really acute guidance, because no one can say for certain exactly when you would round up to Cat 3 or round down to Cat 1. And I think it's become so contentious that the pricing department is not really particularly interested in creating a bunch of Cat 2 line items and trying to take that head on. And I don't blame them.
Well said. I think a lot of estimating and negotiating and being a contractor or an adjuster in this industry is dancing in the grays. There are so many gray areas. There's not a lot of black and white, and you need to be able to tackle things with reasonability and transparency. If you can explain why you chose a Category 3 line item, for example, because there is no Category 2 line item option available, and the Category 1 line item would not be sufficient to be able to tackle that particular activity, then you've given yourself a chance of success at least being able to explain who you are, what you've done, and ideally have an F9 node around it. So, yeah.
Maybe my distinction is if you're running full PPEs, then it's
bounce up to the
Cat 3, because I look at Cat 3 line items, and one of the things that is fairly customary is the yields are lower. And it's been explained to me over the years that when you're working and anybody who's ever done it is working in full PPEs, everything moves slower when you're in full PPEs, right? And you got to Dorn, doff, so on. You're sweating, your gloves are getting full of sweat every few minutes. You're dealing with that. And, you can't see as well. You can't communicate with your teammates as well. It just really slows production.
I think you threw in a Dorn and a doff there.
Yeah, what is it? Doff?
I think it's Dawn. I'm going to Dawn and Doff.
Yeah, Dorn and Doff.
Dorn is a Game of Thrones location. So if I've got any Game of Thrones fans out there.
Yeah, maybe that's what inspired it. I didn't say it with confidence. I was like sneaking up on it. I was like, are we Dorn? Are we Dawn?
I saw you. I got you.
Thank you for clearing that up. But anyhow, I think that would be the distinction that I would make as an estimator or adjuster. Was it warranted to be in full PPEs? Because that's really what those line items are attempting to capture, in my opinion, is the reduced production or the reduced yield.
And to add some final context there, for this is your first plus video you're watching, and you're not sure what an Xactimate yield is. When he says Cat 3 line items typically have lower labor yields, yield is productivity. Meaning you have lower productivity, the harder it is to work in that environment. The more PPEs you put on, the less efficient you are, the less productive you can be in working in a restoration environment. Yes, the inverse relationship between price and yield.
As the yield goes down, the price goes
up. So
right?
Just a good example.
And then the inverse, right? So do keep that in mind, because people confuse that all the time.
And let's actually show a quick example here. If we go into the yield of a normal Category 1, they're looking at a direct yield of 53 square feet of subfloor can be removed per hour. And if you go to the Cat 3 related line item, it's the same labor, but it's now 35.5. So we went from 53 direct yield, 53 square feet per hour to, hey, now it's a Cat 3 environment. I can remove 35.5 square feet per hour.
And since you have it up,
yes.
And since you have it up, so often I see this misinterpreted. The yield is what we all talk about. You're working off the direct yield. The yield is influenced by the supporting events. And so there you see an inefficiency applied of 39.59%. And that's the delta between your direct yield and your yield. It's always informed by your supporting events.
Perfect. All right. If you're interested in more knowing the relationship between yields, labor trade codes, and supporting events, I have an entire 3-day class on that topic. So join us in October.
So take us down now to the new WTR line items for working at height.
Yeah. So we just talked a lot about category 3 line items, right? New cat 3 line items that came out. But we've also got potentially some class 3 line items that came out here. We get a lot of questions, Whatley, about working at height and what kind of OSHA considerations, fall harnesses, what line items in Xactimate exist for working at height. Anytime you have a class 3 loss, water coming down from the ceiling, what additional line items should I be using? Guess what? There are 4 new line items for working at height when working in the WTR category code. So let's dive in and take a look at these line items. It's specific to wet drywall. So we have an add 4 line item, wet drywall on high walls. So you're removing wet drywall at height. You've got 11 to 14 feet. You've got 14 to 20 feet. And then you've got after hours considerations for both of those line items. Now, this may look familiar to anybody that's a subscriber of ours at getinsights.org. If you are an insider and you have a membership plan, you have access to the Insight Sheet database. And I'll bring this over here quickly because we have an entire insight sheet that we published on painting at height, painting walls over 20-foot ceilings. So what we are seeing in this particular price list is an addition for removal of drywall at height. And one of the intricacies of these add 4 working at height line items is the calculation that you are supposed to enter. Specifically, you'll see as I go to the Xactimate line item here, let's go right click, other options, view item information. It'll say additional labor charge for removing wet drywall from ceilings that are 11 to 14 feet high. Note, the additional charge should be applied to the square footage of the area that is 11 to 14 feet high, not the entire square footage of the room. So if I go back to this insight sheet, our database of Xactimate invoicing templates, you can see for the area between 11 and 14 feet high, this was specifically a 12 by 4 wall, you only invoice for that 3 vertical square feet. So you could do PF times 3, being perimeter floor times the 3 feet height to get that 11 to 14 foot range.
But isn't it 4? Because you do 11 feet, 12 feet, 13 feet, 14 feet. I'm using my fingers here. I think it would be PF 4. Like that? PF times 4? 11 foot, 12 foot, 13, 14. Sure, let's go. But that lends to another thing that was odd about the descriptions here is what is customary in the price list is you would go to 11 to 14, then you would go 15 to 20. Seems like there's some overlap there with the two 14s. So that's
like 11 to 14, 14 to 20. So they're just giving, it's a continuation. If you're going above 14, you would use this additional line item 14 to 20. So 6 total.
Yeah, I guess. I guess you have to pick up. What do you have to pick up there between 11 and 20? Is you got to do 9 feet of height. Is that right?
Well, these are, if you notice, these are different unit prices and likely different yields. So what this is saying is that if you're working up to 11 feet would be considered normal. And then if you're working 11 to 14 feet, then you have this particular efficiency add-on metric.
Yep.
And then if you're going above that, it's even more inefficient to work higher than 14 feet. Therefore, you have a 28 cents per square foot if it's above 14 feet. So if we were to look at this in this way, we're going to do PF times 7 here. You wanted to do 11 to 14 feet high, 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 14. I think that's only 3 feet. 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 14. That's 3. And then you would have, right here, 14 to 15, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20. You have 6 feet there. So we have here, this is how you would tackle these particular line items. If you are
that makes sense because it gets us to 9, right? So 3 plus 6 is 9. That makes sense. Here's a problem with these line items. It just took Harrison and I like talking through this live to like figure out how you would optimally use the calculation. And that is the confusion for these add for line items. And there's so much pressed in around it because they've already done paint this way that they basically had to do it in this particular style. But I would say it is cumbersome to write and to review these particular line items. And I suppose that's the value of just, I don't know, pursuing mastery around this price list. Because if I'm reviewing this as a claims manager, you almost have to like watch this video or really think about it, about what would be warranted to make sure that you're not underpaying the claim. That's an underpay, right? That's a new term you and I learned recently at the RIA conference, or, you know, that you're approving an overage here. It would be really easy to do both. So I think it's somewhere around this PF, and that PF would only apply if, you know, all of the four walls would otherwise be affected.
So here's one interesting results of this video series. Whenever we record these, we take a look at these line items and we provide our feedback back to the Xactimate pricing department. And one thing that, as I entered these line items for the first time, the default calculation here was WC. That is a variable that stands for walls and ceilings. Now, based on how these add for at height line items work, the calculation would literally never be WC. It would only ever apply to the wall section at height of that square footage, the add for height. So Xactimate pricing department, expect a message from me relatively soon about how the default calculation here should at least be 0 or PF or anything but WC, because if people use this line item and think it's intended to be WC, we will run into problems settling claims. And if there's anything actionable exists to do as the 501c6 nonprofit that we are, it's to ensure that people don't run into problems when settling claims with Xactimate and Matterport and the tools that we have to settle these claims.
So to that end, I think as an aside to what you submit to the pricing department, perhaps you should include a notion about adding a Cat 3 line item here, because I see the next problem is, okay, we're working a height, we're removing the drywall. Now, what do we do with Cat 3? Now, if you're not doing program work, just take it back 5 minutes, look at the yields, go, okay, there's a delta for Cat 3 of around 39%. So you would just decrease your yield by maybe 40% and then update your description to say Cat 3, and then you're off to the races, right? And that works. That will probably work in claim settlement without issue. The trouble is if you're doing program work, you kind of end up constrained with these line items. And that's where the pricing department is under this kind of new obligation to try to create line items that are ever more detailed to try to accommodate almost every scenario, because you can't deviate from the standard price list in most program work without a whole lot of headache. You know, I don't want to say an absolute you can't, but my goodness, you're going to work for that other $14.
I mean, I specifically went to your Xactimate training class almost 5 years ago now to learn how to justify making changes to the price list and program work. So it's certainly possible, but it's gosh darn good headache.
Yeah. So anyhow, but Cat 3 could be added for those line items, I think, fairly easily. Just follow that same metric of the decreased yield. Okay. What else we got here?
All right. Slightly on the less exciting side of life, but certainly exciting for anybody that's looking at an Xactimate price list. We've got 2 new line items on painting the stairway attic access panels. And if you take a look at this line item in the picture, right, it's really calling out these hidden, disappearing, folding stairway attic accesses. And this line item is designed to paint the cover that essentially tries to hide this faux or this hidden, disappearing staircase. I do have this panel at my house, but I do not have the disappearing staircase. I just got to lift myself up into my attic the hard way with a good old ladder. One thing to note on this particular line item, Xactimate pricing department, expect more feedback. They've called out access exterior panels, which is strange. You and I were talking about.
It's strange for a couple of reasons, because nobody speaks like that. So it would be an exterior access panel, not an access exterior panel one. But has anybody, comment below and show me the images of the exterior access panel that I've never seen before.
Does anyone have
I don't want to invite strangers into my attic, like from the exterior.
Do you have a stairway to your attic with an access panel on the exterior.
Like, I'm sure it exists.
I know of basement doors, right? We're California boys. We don't have basements in California. I know I've seen horror movies when they like swing open the things and they run down into the basement. And so like maybe that's an exterior access panel in somebody's world.
I don't think these are exterior line items. I think that's misleading. I think to the extent that they want to continue to call it an exterior, it should be an exterior access panel, not an access interior, because now you read that and you're like, am I accessing the exterior? Is that part of it? It's quite confusing.
Basically, if you have a disappearing staircase and you need to paint the access panel, you've got 2 line items for it now. Congratulations.
Yes.
Lastly, one thing that we talk about almost every month with new line items that come out are commercial editions. We've got a nurse call station, wireless, detach and reset. This is an add-on to other nurse call stations we've seen in the past year, as Xactimate is used more and more in commercial related claims, specifically a lot in medical, hospital arenas throughout COVID and whatnot. So we're seeing some more additions there. Of note, guys, no cleaning line items this month. Nothing. We're not cleaning golf bags. We're not cleaning bicycles. We're not cleaning tool chests. Yeah. There's no cleaning. Yeah. That's amazing. So that's
just structural line items.
Yeah, just structural. All right. So I'm going to move August to the right. We've got July. Not only do we talk about the new line items that came out every month, but we also talk about changes to existing line items, right? They make changes to yields, components. They make changes to all kinds of different changes to line items. So,
and these are usually significant because they're only getting changed because these line items are getting used and there's impasses emerging around it. And I shouldn't say that's the only reason, but often these adjustments are because there's some situation where it's encumbering swift claim settlement. So that means these line items are getting used a lot, which means these changes can be very effectual and often more effectual than even the addition of a new line item.
So let's start first on the left side. We've got July price list and July line items. On the right side, we've got August price list and August line items. This is San Diego price list if anyone's interested. And we're going to start with yield adjustments. So anytime they make adjustments to a yield, to a component, they add a component. That's what kind of changes we'll talk about here. And one of the changes that you can see here is a bunch of line items in the cabinetry category and related around countertops, added a material component to replace the plus assembly, and modified the description to include material assumptions for caulking. So let's actually take a look at what this looks like, because we have here on the left side, July, you've got a labor line item, you've got material, you've got wood screws. On the right, you have a new component that's providing 7 cents per square foot for the silicone caulk that would be typically applied in a countertop installation. Now, looking at what kinds of countertops here have had this change, you'll note flat laid plastic laminate, granite or marble, post-formed plastic laminate, quartz, solid surface, stainless steel. They've even added to the independent analysis line items, so any kind of ITEL cabinetry related line items, as well as cultured marble. This vanity top, one sink cultured marble has it included as well. And one area that you and I thought was a little strange was in both the cabinetry code and the tile code around countertop subdeck plywood. So we'll get into that in a second. But in general, we saw this kind of similar change of adding caulking to line items, specifically last month and the month before when we were talking about sinks, countertops, faucets, things like that. So this is kind of an extended continuation of, hey, we recognize that silicone caulk would be needed in these fixtures, in these countertops when replacing or resetting them. And so they are adding it to the line item. What are your thoughts on this change? And then go ahead and tell us why subdeck plywood is not the ideal application for this change, but go ahead.
All right, silicone caulk. This hits close to home. Just this week, I had to recaulk with silicone my granite countertop to my undermount stainless steel sink. This is the third time that this has been done in the last month. I actually had a small flood in my kitchen. Wasn't significant enough where I made a claim, but I called out some contractors to fix the plumbing when my cartridge failed on my kitchen faucet. Anyhow, the caulking was done suboptimally the first time. There wasn't enough of it. It was creating a gap. Had them come back out, redo it. They did it again. Then somebody at the house used that sink within like maybe a couple hours. It hadn't fully dried, and so that compromised it again. So then I went and redid it myself with some silicone caulk that I pulled out of the garage. Unfortunately, it was opened like 13 years ago, and so now that silicone caulk never dried. And so this morning I'm out there like running my finger across it, and it's still coming off like it never even attempted to dry.
Right.
So that's a problem. This is just hard on me, man. Like, I understand why they did it, because carriers were having a fit because contractors were billing for silicone caulk to augment their installation of their countertops. But how this was done and the affordance for it, I'm still dubious about. Look at the price deltas here, guys, between last month and this month. So we got another 14
cents per square foot.
It's just not,
or linear foot in this
silicone caulk is hard to deal with, and it's not like acrylic or latex where it's really forgiving and you can just run a wet sponge across it and get it done. For a number of reasons, silicone caulk needs to be done much more thoughtfully. If you don't have a proper caulk bead around an echelon plate for a shower fixture, or like this undermount sink issue that I'm mentioning, it will leak and create major problems. So this is not a cosmetic thing like acrylic caulk. This is actual structural or
consequential damages.
Yeah.
Secondary losses.
Moisture protection is important, and silicone caulk's hard to work with. So, I understand why they didn't add labor, because, they probably always assumed that the caulking was in there. But the affordance for it is just so anemic. Okay. So, that's a little tough to stomach, trying to come down the middle on it. What's also particularly, I think it's outright wrong. Countertop sub deck plywood. What they really probably needed to do is you don't use silicone caulk when you're doing a sub deck. What do you use, Harrison?
Framing adhesive. Construction adhesive found in the framing category code.
Yeah. So you need to adhere the subdeck to the countertop. You can't do that with silicone caulk. That would be a terrible idea. So it's just outright the wrong building material. Hard to be excited about that addition. So that applies to those two line items that mentioned the subdeck.
One other thing, to
that end, like as it states, if I'm a contractor, then bill for your construction adhesive because it's omitted. But now that I've said this on this video, like I assume that change will be in the wings for these related line items. I just want it to be right one way or the other. Sorry, contractors out there, but that doesn't make any sense. So anyhow, this is tough to stomach if you're a contractor. Like now I've got 13 cents for doing all my silicone caulking with the countertop. And what seems to be totally omitted there is you're at least hitting it twice if there's like a backsplash involved. And then what do we do with the backsplash? I mean, maybe you augment the backsplash line items with silicone caulk, but I don't know. Last month I kind of bit my tongue more with like the sink, so on, but I spent a fortune as a contractor on silicone caulk. I had to go out and recaulk things constantly because it was done in a way that wasn't satisfactory for the policyholder. It's just what happened to my contractor. If I, it wasn't sensitive to margins and so on, I'd have my contractor coming back out there today to redo my silicone caulk for the third time. All of this to say, I think it's a more significant activity. It's more important. That 14 cents does not adequately.
A linear foot.
Yeah, it doesn't, like maybe the labor was baked in. I get it, but it's certainly not even from the material perspective. It just doesn't seem adequate.
I think it's safe to say, to summarize, adding the silicone caulk into these countertop line items is bittersweet. It is bitter because in your reaction and experience, it is not providing enough relief to the contractor who is providing and installing this silicone caulk. But at the same time, it is trying to eliminate or reduce the friction around these line items and these activities. If contractors are invoicing independently and separately for silicone caulk, and there are subjective related arguments around how much caulk would be needed and what would be appropriate that holds up the settling of the claim, that's not great. So all of us in this industry are trying to find that middle line of what's the most reasonable way to be able to invoice for the associated costs of repairing the damage due to a covered loss.
Yep. And
Right,
I guess
so-
they could have just, if they weren't considering the contractor at all, they could just say, oh, additional item information includes silicone caulk, right? And they could have done nothing. So there is that. And at least you have something to work off of in terms of a yield or otherwise to have a conversation about why it's not adequate or not. They didn't just hide behind the additional item information. So they deserve that credit.
So take a look at the line items. If you're watching this video at getinsights.org, which by the way is the best place to watch it, where we will hyperlink the line items that we talk about. And you can just click on a hyperlink and it'll take you right to where we talk about that line item in August edition. This will be a good opportunity for you to at least have this conversation with the fellow contractors, fellow employees, adjusters that you work with about the changes when it comes to silicone caulk and how you want to interpret and tackle those changes moving forward. That's the majority of the actual yield changes. So all of those line items had an added material component, silicone caulk, and the descriptions were updated to reflect caulk is included. Now, let's take a look at some additional item information changes specifically for August. These 3 line items here, 2 appliance line items, 1 WTR around washing machines. Do you note that the descriptions and the line item descriptions have updated? Stackable washer and dryer, washer/washing machine and dryer, washing machine reset, washer/washing machine reset. So one of the most frustrating things, I think, Whatley, when you and I have flown around the country and we train people is like, how many of you enjoyed the Xactimate search bar? How many of you are able to find the exact line item you're looking for when you type in the exact category and selector code, right? There's been some inefficiencies in the past around that search bar. Specifically, how am I supposed to know if half the line items are called washer and half the line items are called
assume
washing?
That's all of them.
Right. Is it washer? Is it washing? So good to see some changes here this month, trying to make it easier to find the line items in the Xactimate price list. If you say washing machine, it's going to be there now. If you look for washer machine, it's going to be there now. So all of it's done here.
The machine and dryer combo was a better way to state it as opposed to stackable. Because sometimes you can have a side-by-side combo. So that was just a thoughtful adjustment where it accommodated both scenarios.
So anytime they're updating descriptions to make them easier to search, regardless of what regional lingo you may use to describe that activity, fantastic. Continuing with that theme, clawfoot used to be, there's 2 or 3 different types of just how they typed in clawfoot. It was claw dash foot. It was clawfoot as one. I think this has all been standardized now to claw dash foot, as you can see in the August here on the right. So that if I were to look for example, claw dash foot, you'll see a bunch of clawfoot tubs.
Right.
If I search for clawfoot, one word, nothing will come up. So if you've been looking or using,
which isn't great in and of itself. So I hope we're getting to a point where this Boolean search could handle either synonym, so on. That is a valuable initiative, but that said, this is a move it's just a triage. It's like a move in the right direction. So anyhow, good to see that happened for clawfoot tubs, shower faucet. That helps. This one I'm a little more passionate about, the water heater seismic strap. This is really helpful. I can remember like as a claims manager getting a claim and it's like somebody used like this up to 80-gallon seismic strap. And I'm like, what? That doesn't seem right. It's only a 50-gallon tank, right? Which is like a customary residential 50-gallon tank. But I'm like, up to maybe, is that the line item? But then I was looking at the selector code and it had the greater than. I'm like, something's wrong. So I had to go back into the system and be like, nope, this needs to get downgraded to WHSS sans the greater than symbol. And so that's the former line item and the more customary one. So how they had it here with this up to was really confusing because you could, especially like erroneously as an inexperienced estimator, you could just add the 120 and you say, oh, well, it goes up to 120 gallons. So it must be right. However, now it's clearly broke out.
So let me explain exactly the change here. These water heat seismic strap kit line items used to say up to 55 gallons, up to 80 gallons, up to 120 gallons. But that could be confusing because what if it's 60 gallons or if you used a 50, you could use it up to 80. If it was 50 gallons.
Or you could apply the 120 to anything.
Technically, because it's all up to 120.
Yeah.
If you were having a hard time finding the right line item here. So looking at the changes here, it now says seismic strap kit up to 55 gallons. Then there's another line item for 56 to 80 gallons. If you're in that range, here is your specific line item. And then they've got 81 to 140 gallons. So if it's in this particular range, here is your line item for it. Anytime a line item is more clear, we like it because it makes it easier to use and easier to settle the claim without any kind of arguments or obstructions along the way. We like that. Let's see here. Lastly, there was a description change here in this post in a pole framed steel building. This may not be the most commonly used line item in the world, but I will say that what they added here was to make sure it was clear that air moisture barriers and roof insulation are included in this particular MTL PP line item. And lastly, there was some changes in the reset activity code on this nurse call station corridor dome controller wireless. Basically, yield was increased fantastically as Xact did some research from people performing this activity and realized they were off on their yields. So yields went up, which meant price went down. But I don't think that this nurse call station is the most commonly used line item. So no need to pull out the pitchforks on the yield on this particular line item.
Speaking of pitchforks, let's circle back on this lumber situation that you.
Yeah, you want to talk about the countertop? Yeah,
you got it. If you guys look here, the pricing of the sub-deck line items actually went down, despite the fact that the pricing department added some material relief for the silicone caulk. So why did the price go down? Well, that can be attributed to one particular thing: it's not a change in labor. It is the price of the plywood. Lumber, right? And so, as much as our ninjas were up in arms about Xactimate not responding to the spike in pricing for lumber, because it happened so suddenly, like they're going to trail, 4 to 6 weeks. There's just no getting around that. But now the lumber prices have more or less cratered, right? And so now the pricing department's got to track those changes back down. And so that's why you see the pricing actually decrease for the subdeck line items. So expect to see that all throughout the FRM category, is that the pricing's probably gone down significantly because the price of material has gone down significantly. It's been a weird year. And from what I read about it, I think there was some price fixing going on, some anti-competitive behavior, some folks that were hoarding, the lumber, whatever else. Some people got smoked when the bottom fell out of that market. I think it was a little artificially high. And I just encourage our user base to be empathetic to the pricing department. That is a really difficult thing to track in real time, both up and down when things are moving in that volatile of a way.
Well said. That'll do it for the August edition of the Price List Update Summary. If you have questions about these line items, feel free to comment below. We are going to do something new where we actually go live for the first time. We're hoping to publish this video Tuesday, August 10th, then Wednesday, August 11th. We will be going live on Facebook. This will be on the Actionable Insights Facebook page at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So
tune in for that train wreck.
Yeah,
I have no idea how that's going to go.
It's the first time we're doing it, right? We always get questions after the fact. When people watch this video, they want to know more about, hey, this line item, that line item. We want to put ourselves out there. So we're going to go live on Wednesday, August 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific. So if you have watched this video and you have questions about it, come join us on the Actionable Insights Facebook page and let us know what your thoughts on this video series, the Price List Update Summary, the August changes, and anything else you might have in mind. We're open to it. All right. Thank you for enjoying. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Feel free to comment below on whatever platform you're watching. Check us out at getinsights.org to take advantage of all of the estimating and invoicing resources we have here at Actionable Insights. And good luck settling all those claims out there.
Keep building, folks.